Welcome to Tell Me Where I'm Going Wrong. In this episode, we get riled up about one of the worst movies ever made, Jurassic World. We explore the multitude of problems with this dinosaur cinema juggernaut, including sexism, racism, anti-fatness, and toxic masculinity. And we consider how white people have co-opted and weaponized the term woke. Enjoy the ride.
Hi, welcome back to another episode of Tell Me Where I'm Going Wrong. My name is Josh, and together with one of my exes and one of my best friends, Sean, we present this weekly podcast. So welcome, Sean. How are you?
Hi, thanks for the intro. I'm
Very
doing
welcome.
okay. I am in a different setting than where I was for most of the other
I've
episodes.
noticed.
I sound a bit weird with my dentures in. Do you know what's really weird about dentures? Well, for me, this experience. Sorry to dive right into dentures.
Yeah,
I was chomping at the bit last episode to talk about them.
yeah, drum, yeah,
When
drum effect.
when I have what's drum effect?
You know, like like a bad joke,
All right.
chomping at the bit. I'm assuming that was deliberate.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And it also is related to our main topic this week, dinosaurs. But anyway,
Don't give it away too soon. Dinosaurs with dentures.
dinosaurs with dentures. When I have these headphones on, I talk. I feel like I'm talking like more impeded, and I think it makes me sound like I can't hear myself properly.
Mm-hmm.
And if I take them off, I feel like I have more control over the way I sound, and I don't sound as like. But does it sound different to you when I put them off or on?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. You sound the same. I can tell a slight difference, just, I suppose, because I know you so well. I can hear a slight sort of lisp on the S's, but apart from that, I mean, compared to where you were a week ago when you first had
Oh
gotten the
yes,
dentures and you were
yes.
struggling to speak normally. But yeah,
I've always had a lisp on the S's,
yeah, yeah.
but now it's really pronounced,
Mm.
and it's just difficult to speak the way I would normally speak.
Well,
So,
do you want to sit this one out, and I can just talk about dinosaurs instead? Or,
well,
um,
there's a lot of S's in the different names of dinosaurs.
That's true. I didn't know you were going to talk about your dentures on the pod, and I'm, happy that you feel comfortable sharing it with all our thousands of listeners and followers. But
Thousands. Where are you getting that number
I
from?
was being facetious. Um, and but when you first jumped straight in with the dentures, I immediately thought of. Have you seen that viral video? It's old now. I mean, it's probably like 10 or more years old. And it's that man who gets his guitar and he's got like, I don't know what the difference is. Maybe you can inform me and our listeners about what the difference is between a false teeth and dentures, essentially the same thing, or,
Yeah,
okay. So
but
he gets,
I think normally false teeth refer to like the entire, like
yeah,
the whole, like the roof or the
yeah, when you
bottom of
have a
your mouth.
hole.
The whole
Mhm.
thing is teeth. Whereas I have the thing that fits in,
Right.
but it's just
It's
a
just a
couple of teeth.
couple. Yeah. So, well, this man on this viral video has a full set of false teeth, a full denture, if you will, for upper and lower, and he puts them in, and he gets his guitar, and he goes to sing a song, and then I can't remember, something happens. He drops his guitar, his false teeth fall out, and then the camera, I mean, it's probably all fabricated like most online content is anyway. The camera falls on the floor and the dog picks up the teeth. This little Yorkshire Terrier picks up the teeth and has the teeth in its mouth. It's brilliant. I'll try and find it and put it in the show notes because it's priceless.
Hilarious.
So
Well,
yeah, that's what I
I
think of when you say dentures.
I feel like I'm a completely different person now because I have missing teeth in my mouth. And I've always been very conscious of that and self-conscious, and like I don't like to open my mouth very much when I talk, and I don't like drawing attention to my mouth.
Hmm.
And now is different. Like I find myself laughing more and talking more animatedly. Is that a word? Animatedly,
Yeah, I
with
think
more
so.
expression because I can open my mouth without feeling so much like embarrassment or internalized guilt or shame.
Hmm.
And
That's nice.
it's weird, right? Like how something like that can change your perception of yourself.
Mm. Mm. And
But
it's it's ironic because you're not known as somebody who holds back in speaking, but
no,
it's interesting that you've struggled with that self-image, I suppose, or that self-conscious struggle for so many years. And because I don't want to speak for you, but I think it's quite pertinent that the fact that you do have a couple of teeth missing is in large part or in whole related to a very an upbringing in sort of poverty and with abusive, not particularly good parents. And so, yeah, it's a manifestation, a physical manifestation of that struggle. So,
yeah, and I suppose for a lot of people who wear dentures, there's also, a sense of shame or being less than with that
mm,
even. But
mm,
I've decided to just completely not give a shit and embrace
yeah,
it.
tits to
And
the wind.
yeah, like dentures to the wind. I just don't.
Mhm.
I'm just making myself not care. Like
Good.
it's uh, like when I hosted a party the other night for about 80 vegans. I mean, we talk about it on the pod about London Vegan Social,
Mm,
and it was only a few days into having the dentures, and I was really talking with a much more pronounced speech impediment. And people know me. Some of them have known me for a few years. Some of them just met me. But I
mm,
just told everybody that I knew. I said, if I sound a bit weird, it's because I got dentures.
mm.
And some people were like, oh, that's great. Like, ask a few questions. But a lot of people just like wanted nothing to do with the conversation. I think it's one of those things that we're kind of conditioned in society to think is a little bit embarrassing.
It's taboo. It's not something to be confronted head on. It's to be avoided, and
Yeah.
yeah,
What other things are like that? Like,
so many things to do with physical appearance and body. I mean, weight is one of them. A lot of people really don't like to talk about weight, and I think we are planning, I think, to dedicate maybe a whole episode to weight in the future. But obviously, both of us have our weights have varied quite drastically in our lives, and we have for most of our adult lives have carried around extra weight, which it is a term which, I don't really like anyway, because it does buy into the whole fat phobia that's out there. But people don't like talking about weight. People don't like talking about fatness and obesity. People don't like talking about sex, particularly, some forms of sex. And so, yeah, it's interesting to see people's reactions to things.
well, can you hear that noise happening
I
outside? This is
can. What is
picking it
that?
up. I don't know. There's
Sounds like an
some.
explosion.
I don't know if it's something being unloaded from a truck or.
Hmm.
But anyway, talking about uh, weight loss and
Hmm.
not wanting to, be open about it. It kind of we can do a cheeky segue into our main topic this week, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
um, the star of this movie that you want to talk about. Famously lost a lot of weight. He was not the T Rex, but Chris Pratt.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, when he was on Parks and Recreation, that's the name of the TV show.
Oh yeah, yeah,
He
yeah.
wasn't, like I mean, I've been fatter than he ever was in his life, I'm sure, but his character was known as a chubby, sort of stocky character. He was a heavier set person, like he was big, and when he transitioned into becoming a movie star, he became super fit,
Mm,
like working
mm,
out, losing a lot of weight, like muscling up. And so I can remember This is something I've discussed with you before, and I think also with our friend Melinda once when we were in Los Angeles. Around the time that he was transitioning from being a TV star to a sort of A-list Hollywood star, he gave an interview in which he said, "Oh, I had a conversation with somebody in the industry, and they said you have to decide now whether you want to make this leap, where everything about your life will change,
Mm,
and you have to throw yourself into it 110%. And if you do it and it works, your life will never be the same. You won't be the same person, or you can just go sort of into it like with your foot a little bit on the pedal and just explore it a little bit, and you won't reach those heights,
mm,
and you might be able to keep some semblance of your life normal, and you might not." And he said you have to make the choice. And Chris
mm,
Pratt saying, "I remember being really terrified in this conversation, thinking, do I want this? Do I want to do this?"
mm.
And having to make that choice because they were offering me this avenue of stardom, and to go into it I had to give myself over to it and give myself up.
God,
and
that's so awful, isn't it? Like it's so
and
awful that the power plays that happen in the film industry,
yeah,
and I mean, I don't know, if we have the time to really go into it and really do it in a respectful and meaningful way. But the Me Too movement was born out of those power imbalances that exist in the film industry. But yeah, like
yeah,
that's such an awful thing to be confronted with, isn't it? To
yeah.
say there's this fundamental thing about you and the way you look, which if you change will completely transform your life. Um, and it
Have
shouldn't
you
be that way.
there are two sort of well-known examples of this being portrayed in movies and TV shows that I can think of, and they one is done in a realistic sort of way, and one is done in a more symbolic way. The realistic way is
What is portrayed exactly? Weight
where
loss.
people sort of buy into the machinery and they lose their autonomy,
Mm,
and they have to sort of give themselves over to those machinations of Hollywood and
mm,
that dark energy of Hollywood. And the first one I can think of is Louis C.K. Did a drama series. It was a comedy slash drama series where he was offered to be the host of a late night TV show, and they showed what he had to do and how he had to play the game to become that. And it was really dark. And it made me think of someone like James Corden, and like,
mm,
what you have to give up, and it's hard work. You have to do exactly what the studios want you to do,
mm,
and then they engineer success or a level of success for you.
mm. But
Um,
they have the ultimate power in those situations, and
yeah,
it just leads to such abuse of power.
yeah. And
Um,
then what becomes of those people once they step into that role and they play that role? Like someone like Jimmy Fallon,
mm,
who um, weirdly is also connected to the movie that we're going to talk about
hmm.
today. But what becomes of them? Do they just become that shell of a person or that persona or that public image? And that's all they do 5, 6 nights a week. And they work all day. They go to the makeup chair. They go and meet with the joke writers. There's a team of like 20 joke writers sitting around a table. I mean,
Mm,
it's such a weird life to have, right?
yeah, it's such a fabricated existence in a way, isn't it? I mean, who knows? Maybe Jimmy Fallon's a very happy person. I don't know, but from the outside looking in, it does seem incredibly soulless and joyless, doesn't it? To
Yeah.
be this projected image that is so fabricated in
The
so
the
many
other
ways.
the other example I was thinking of where this
Mm.
is represented, but in a more sort of mystical, symbolic way, is Mulholland Drive, where the film
Yeah,
director within the movie is told
mm,
you have to hire this one person to be in your
yeah,
movie. And
yeah,
if you don't, well, they just say you don't have a choice, you have to do it. And he has
yeah,
to go and visit the mysterious cowboy out in the canyon,
mm,
and they give him a piece of paper with the person's name on it that he has to hire. He's
yeah,
told he has no choice but to do it. He doesn't do it, and he gets like kicked out of his house. His car gets smashed up. He is blacklisted. He's not allowed to talk to anyone. He's uninvited
Hmm.
from parties. And so it's
Hmm.
kind of like an extreme version
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
But that's how it would work, right? Like these people who like wield power like that in Hollywood have
Mm.
the power to make or break people. And
Yeah.
I think
Uh,
that's obvious with some of the lackluster or not very exciting people who become celebrities.
Yeah, but when you combine that power inequality or that power imbalance with something like weight and weight loss and
Mm-hmm.
fat phobia, it's so incredibly powerful and so incredibly depressing as well. Listening to I was just listening couple of weeks ago, I think, to Rebel Wilson's autobiography. I listened to it as an audiobook.
Yeah.
And just, yeah, some of the things that she was told that, she would never work again if she did this or if she didn't do this. It's just, yeah, it's very, very sad. And there's a huge, huge imbalance. But yeah, shall we segue into our main topic because normally, as you know, if you listen to this podcast a lot and or watch it on YouTube, you'll know that we don't really plan what we're going to talk about. It's very off the cuff. It's very, it's just yeah, it's chaotic and unresearched in most examples. But last week, I think I mentioned on last week's episode that I was feeling not well. I had a cold. And after we recorded the episode, I ended up actually staying in bed for 3 days with a horrible cold. And I don't know what our listeners and viewers are like, but I tend to just watch. I don't want to watch when I'm ill. I don't want to watch good quality TV or films because I feel like if I'm not mentally all there because of the illness, I'm going to miss out on the enjoyment of it in some way. So I tend to sort of revert to just shit. Like,
But it's
I don't
also a way of like, you don't have to use a lot of energy to
exactly.
concentrate. You
Yeah,
can
you
just
can just
tap,
zone out.
like dip into it a little bit. And if you fall
Exactly.
asleep or look away, it doesn't matter. And if you want to rest for a little bit.
Exactly. So with that in mind, I saw that on ITV, which is one of the TV stations here in the UK, ITV they had all of the Jurassic Park films on their website for viewing. And so I thought, okay, I'll watch them because I did really like the original 1990, what was it, 94,
93.
93 Jurassic Park. I mean, looking back at it now through a modern lens, there's so much about it that is not good. But nonetheless, I just thought, well, I'm got nothing better to do, so I'm just going to watch the Jurassic Park films. And I got to Jurassic World, which was sort of the first one of the reboots in the 2012, was it? Anyway, doesn't
I think it was 2015, but I might be
maybe
wrong.
maybe. And it was just so. I mean, I'd seen it in the cinema. I think you and I went to see it in the cinema together, didn't we?
Yeah.
Back in
Yeah, it was
the Westfield.
2015 it was.
Okay. And I remember then just thinking, my God, like this is so awful in so many ways. But rewatching it last week, I was so shocked that I said to Sean, we have to do an episode about this. I can't believe how bad this film is on so many levels, and we need to talk about it. So,
I was annoyed when you suggested it because I remember it being one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
mhm.
Really, truly, from the first time we saw it, I can remember walking out of there thinking, this is one of the worst things I've ever seen.
Mm.
I didn't think the original Jurassic Park was wonderful, but I enjoyed it in some sort of, big popcorn movie
Yeah,
experience.
yeah, it was a spectacle. It was spectacular.
But I remember Jurassic World being just a pile of absolute, like, brontosaurus shit. Like,
Yeah.
it was so bad. And so when you suggested, I thought you'd lost your mind from being ill, that you were suggesting watching it.
Hmm.
I thought you maybe had some sort of delirium.
Well, I think I
Um,
did. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just putting some lip balm on because
Uh-huh.
I don't know what's happening. Do you know, I've got this weird theory that because I'm opening my mouth more and smiling more, my lips are cracking.
Well, it could be that. It could just be that we've had such cold weather here, and that obviously
Yeah,
makes you have the heating on more, and that makes the air much drier indoors. So that it could be that. It could be the dentures. Yeah, it could
because
be
I'm
the
smiling
effect of
more.
that. But yeah. So you thought I was delirious and ridiculous for suggesting it, but then what did you like when you realised I was serious?
Hmm.
Did you what?
Well, I tried to talk you out of it, but then you were like, no, 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 we need to do this for the podcast. I was like,
Well, because I just
out of
think there
all of the
is.
movies in the world that you could want to revisit and talk about and dissect, it just seems so peculiar to me that you would pick
Mm.
one that we both think is a dog shit movie.
Well, yeah, but I think because we've had a lot of conversations on this podcast about some of the topics that we want to talk about in regards to this film. And I thought it would just be a very good excuse to have that conversation. I wanted to talk to you about it on or off air, but I thought it would actually be a good excuse to actually do it on air. And
Okay.
I'd like to hear what our listeners have to say. But before we do, I just need to quickly jump off camera for a second.
What's happening? Why are you off camera?
And I just need to put my Jurassic World hat on.
Where the hell did you get that? This is the real reason why you wanted to do this episode. So
I'm
you
a
could.
super fan. No, okay. The oh god, my hair's all messed up. But the story behind this hat, it's so ridiculous. So about oh god, I don't know how old are we? How old was my niece? I think it was 6 years ago. Um, I was my niece was turning 10, and my niece lives in Philadelphia, so my brother, wife, and the two kids were going to Disney World to celebrate her 10th birthday, and my mum and I flew over to Orlando to have the holiday with the family. I was living in Mexico. My mum's in London, and we flew to Orlando and we had a holiday. And even in February in Orlando, it was so hot, and my mum didn't have a hat. She didn't bring a cap with her, and we were in no, hang on. This was we'd been at Disney. This was in Universal Studios. So we were at Disney for a few days, then we went to Universal Studios, and we were in Universal Studios in the Jurassic Park section. And she
Yeah.
was so hot, and she wanted to buy a cap, and the only hat she could find was that Jurassic World hat, and it's. I just every time she puts it on, I laugh so much, and she doesn't care. She's like, I don't even know if she's seen the film, but she doesn't care. She's like, well, I just it's for her. It was like a practicality.
Who? Sorry, is this your mom that bought the hat?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And how much was the hat? Was it like forty
Oh, it was like
dollars?
$35 or something 6 years ago. So yeah, I mean it's such
Outrageous.
an absolute rip off. But yeah, every time she puts it on, I laugh because it's Jurassic.
Remember the Jurassic Park ride at Universal in Los Angeles,
Hmm.
and it was
Yeah,
broken.
yeah. It's been broken for I don't know. I don't know if it ever worked.
Well, I think they've fixed it and they've rebranded it to match the new movies now,
Oh, okay.
and they've tried to fix the elements of it.
Mm.
But yeah, it was
Oh, it's
so
so
rubbish.
busted. Yeah, busted.
Anyway, let's
So
start by with Jurassic World.
yeah.
I haven't seen all of the Jurassic Park movies.
Hmm.
I know that I've seen the first one. I don't
Yeah,
know if I've seen the second one.
yeah. You don't need to.
Was
Trust
there
me.
a was there a
There was a
third
third one.
was there a third one in before this Chris Pratt thing?
Yeah, there were three films. So the original, and then they did a Jurassic Park 2 with Jeff Goldblum and who else was in it? You know that thing we talk about stage brain when you can't think of a name or you can't
Yeah.
form words properly? Julianne Moore. That's what I was trying to think of. Julianne Moore is in it. Um, I don't know
So
who
was
else is in it. I
Laura
can't
Dern
remember.
only in the first one?
No, and then in the third one, Laura Dern and Sam Neill came back for the third one. I mean, Laura Dern was barely in the third one. She was just
Okay,
sort
so
of an
Jurassic
incidental
Park
character.
in 1993, The
Hmm.
Lost World in
Yeah, that was
1997, and then
mm,
Jurassic Park 3 in 2001.
okay.
And then it was all the way until 2015 Jurassic World.
Hmm.
And then there's a newish one, Jurassic World Camp Cretation. What's that? Is that like
That's an animated thing, but in terms of the actual sort of live action films, there was Jurassic World that we're going to talk about today. Jurassic World,
Fallen Kingdom,
Fallen Kingdom, yeah, and then after that there was Jurassic World Dominion,
World Dominion? Yeah.
and then
That-
there's a new one coming out this
oh
year
yeah.
with Scarlett Johansson and Chris Pratt, I believe.
Oh, what a fucking
Which, yeah, I'm
dog's dinner of a.
eagerly anticipating.
And it's called Rebirth.
Yeah.
Like
Um,
I don't know what. Have you seen any of the other modern ones?
what, like the animated things? Oh,
No,
you mean the other? Yeah, I've
like
seen
the
them all. Like I
you
said, I
have.
was ill in bed for a week.
So
Yeah,
even these ones after this crummy one we were going to talk about,
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know how you do it. Like, oh, it
So,
actually hurts my brain to think about it.
all right, let's just dive in then. Let's dive into the film. So,
You might need to give people a little recap of what it's about if they don't know.
all right. So there's after the colossal disaster of Jurassic Parks 1, 2, and 3, the company behind
But what is that? Like, what happened in those first three movies? Really quickly, there was a
well,
theme park.
nature finds
People,
a way.
people,
Nature finds a way.
people might not know what it's even about. Like, what the
Well, it's
context
based on
is.
there's a Michael Crichton novel, and it's based on that. So it's based on the premise that very rich, sort of not scientist, but a very rich person decides to extract dinosaur DNA from fossilized mosquitoes, and or mosquitoes that are trapped in amber. And so there's still enough DNA to extract from them and bring dinosaurs back to life in the modern era. And he does this in on a fictional island off the west coast of Costa Rica. And he he sets it up as a theme park where they have dinosaurs on display, so like a zoo basically. But before it opens, he has a team of experts come in and sort of test it along with his grandchildren, and it all goes to shit. The dinosaurs escape, lots of people die, and the theme park never opens. And then the second and the third films are sort of variations on that theme. And then, like many other Hollywood reboots, the new films, the Jurassic World films, are basically the same story again, but in a different set of circumstances. But there's another island, a bigger island with a successful theme park, and working on the island are I don't know. Is this too much level of detail? Interrupt
Yeah,
me if it's just
yes,
going.
it's way
Okay,
too
yeah,
much. I mean, it's
okay.
the dreariest storyline.
It's just like a monster movie where the monsters are dinosaurs. It's set in. It's supposed to have an element of verisimilitude. You know, it's supposed to be believable that it could happen,
Oh,
and it's
okay.
just.
I made some notes. You want to talk about believability? I
Mhm.
made some notes, and I said one of the problems was even fantasy. This is my note here. Even fantasy movies have to have some plausibility. This was nonsense.
Mhm.
You know, because even if something like, I don't know, a disaster movie or a monster movie or a horror movie, there has to be some level of like, yeah, that if that weird, unbelievable thing happened, this might be the flow knock on effect,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
This had none of that. This was just like random scenes of dinosaurs
yeah.
doing.
It's truly a pile of shit. This film, but apart, I mean that. Yeah, you're right. Like the that aspect of it is flawed, but that's not the worst thing about it. I think we should just dive in. My first, I've written down in my notes here. There are four main problems with this film.
Just four.
Sexist, well, but broadly speaking, the sexism, the racism, the anti-fat bias, and the depictions of masculinity, and they are so profound and
Mhm.
shocking to me that I can't believe this film got made in the way that it did. It's so awful and offensive on so many levels.
Yeah.
Um, so should we dive in with the
See,
first
I
one?
remember that from the first time we watched it. So when you suggested watching it again,
Yeah.
I was just like, this fills me with rage. Even the idea of having to watch it again. But yeah, one of my things I wrote down was toxic masculinity,
Hmm.
and um,
Well,
like,
let's talk about that then. Let's talk about that first of all.
oh my
Let's put
god.
men first.
Okay, let's put a white man first, a white rich man
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
Okay, so this bullshit renegade character that they try and create
You're talking
has,
about Chris Pratt's
yeah,
character.
Chris Pratt's character Owen. I don't know Owen's last name,
Doesn't
but
matter.
he it is such a like a cheap knockoff of like Indiana Jones, Mad
Yep.
Max, that sort of renegade outlaw guy who lives like plays by his own rules for
Yep.
whatever reason. And it's not, there's no character development at all. For whatever reason, he lives in a caravan or a shack next to a lake or something
Rides a
and
motorbike.
rides a motorbike. Why, in the most futuristic place on earth, would
Mm.
he not just even live in a normal fucking house? Like, why is he living in a shack
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
cooking on a
It's
fire or whatever
yeah.
he's doing?
It's all the tropes of like toxic masculinity and modern like the American type of masculinity, the Marlboro Man style. I mean, if this had been made in another time, he would have been smoking cigarettes because
But yeah, not
it's
even done
just
well, right? Not even done
no,
well. And
no.
and talking about toxic masculinity, there's this one scene where these two kids, I assume they're both teenagers.
Hmm.
One of them says when he sees Owen, oh my god, I can't even believe I'm talking about this. Like when he sees Owen, I don't know, feeding the raptors or whatever they are, and he
Mm.
said, which one's the alpha? And Owen says, "You're looking at him, mate," or something like that. Like he's the alpha.
It's so awful. But those two kids as well, I wrote down. There's a scene on that where that basically when the younger kid is the more sort of effeminate one who's much more emotional. The older one, the older teenager is, more sort of, masculine and
Surly.
surly, less emotional. And so the sort of the one of the subplots or one of the themes in the film is that the older kid teaches the young one how to sort of man up, and when they sort of jump off a waterfall together, and they do this like daring thing, they bond over that, and like the young kid suddenly becomes less fearful. I mean, it's so fucking
But
horrible.
also that creepy, those kids were just bad as well. And I think it was like the actors were just bad, but also the script was, and the care of character development or time for those kids to actually convey any emotion just wasn't present. So
Hmm.
they were
Hmm.
just, might as well have been stick figures walking around on the screen. Like they were so
Yeah,
terrible.
yeah. I mean, that's the whole
There
thing is
there were
so.
all these weird little asides and incidences
Mm,
with those kids, which was meant to give you, I don't know, like a little feeling of attachment to them or something, but they were just so ineffectual in the way that it was carried out. So
mm,
for some reason, that teenager had to say goodbye to his girlfriend back home before he came to the island.
yeah.
But then there were about two or three incidences on the island where he was looking at other like
Like
sexy
flirt,
young women.
yeah, flirting with other women. So like
And
even that trope of like, to be a man, you have to like play the field sort of
but it
thing.
didn't make sense about what emotion he was meant to be feeling. Because when his brother recognized what he was doing, he'd be like, ugh, and annoyed. But what was that meant to be? Like,
Well, it
I couldn't
wasn't.
work out what it
It
was meant
wasn't.
to
It
be.
was well, it was a very unthought out, very unintelligent portrayal of a stereotype of masculinity. And that was, that it's just such a bad film in so many ways, and that being one of them. That
And
all
also
these
the terrible, 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 fucking unthought out plot hole of why were they there anyway without
to
their
visit
parents
to
and their
visit their
parents.
aunt. Their parents are
Yeah,
getting divorced.
yeah, but
Uh,
that wasn't even clear or thought out or anything. Like you
no,
didn't
it
see the
was
parents have any sort of dynamic between
no.
themselves or the kids.
And you do
And
wonder sometimes with things like this, like you wonder how much was lost on the cutting room floor. Like you do wonder whether any of these things that we're going to talk about um, were originally more thought through, and perhaps there was more depth to them, but they just didn't make the final edit. But we'll
Because
probably
that
never know.
that actor who plays their mum, who you
Hmm.
mostly see through phone calls, who's and
Yeah.
then crying outside that boardroom,
Oh yeah,
like it
yeah.
didn't
Like
make sense.
the portrayal of the portrayal of women is just hideous as
But
well.
I
Like
mean,
it's
that
just
actor, I don't know her name, who plays the mum. She's a really good actor. I've seen her in stuff
yeah,
where I've been blown away by her.
yeah.
And to be reduced to that, not
I
even
know.
one dimensional, I wouldn't even say character. It was so appalling.
There's another apart from those two teenagers, there's also is it Larry, the guy who works so in the control room, obviously Bryce Dallas is what's her name in the film? I can't remember. Their love interest for Owen,
I don't know.
what's her name? Anyway, regardless.
Sarah?
Sh
Aunt Sarah?
no, I don't think so. Maybe, who knows? Doesn't matter. But they're the two people, the man and the woman that work together with her in the control room. And the guy's a real sort of like dorky nerd, and he's wearing like a vintage Jurassic Park t-shirt,
Oh,
and he has all little toys on his like little plastic dinosaur toys on his desk, and he's
oh,
portrayed as being, this dorky, unmanly nerd. And she even has a line in it at one point where she says to him, "Damn it, Larry, be a man and do something for once in your life."
oh
And you
yeah,
just,
I wrote that down. Be a man and do something for once in your life was my final note.
yeah,
And
it's,
I, it was so out of nowhere.
hmm
Like there wasn't even any development of him as that sort of personality
well,
that would
but no,
warrant that.
but
There wasn't
I
any sort of
there
development.
there was, and it just gets worse because the only other bit of character development there was for Larry was that you just hear him. It's a really short snippet. You just hear him talking earlier in the film about his stepfather and how and it's so sort of, it goes so quickly and it's between two steps different things that you almost miss it. But he also says, Larry says, "Oh, what did I write in my notes? Oh, I think of my stepfather as if he was my real father." So even in that tiny snippet, they've allowed to keep that in the film just to emasculate him further and portray him as somebody who didn't have a good father figure growing up, comes from like a quote unquote broken home, and had a stepfather who he now feels is his real father. Just to emasculate him even more, they let that stay in the final edit, and it's just so fucking offensive. It's
And that
so
weird
awful.
bit where the woman that he works alongside, who
Mm.
is kind of also mousy and geeky,
Hmm.
when she is evacuating, and he says, "I'm going to stay behind, and in case I don't see you," he goes to kiss her.
Yeah,
He says, "No, I'm got a
I've got a
boyfriend, whatever."
boyfriend. Hmm.
It's like another way of like emasculating him to
Yeah,
say, "Oh, like you
yeah.
didn't even get the woman," or like just these plot holes and there's a lack of plausibility. Someone that you work with, who is your best friend at work, who you're that
Hmm.
close to, and you've
That you wouldn't
obviously
know
worked
they
with for
have a
years,
partner.
you wouldn't know that they had a partner.
I know. It's
It
just,
was,
and the implication or the implied meaning is that he is such a nerd and such an unmasculine man that he's never had the guts to do this before, that he's never had the guts to act on his desire for her before. And it's
yeah,
just so offensive. It's so
yeah.
awful and offensive.
Also,
Um,
like the lack of plausibility was so annoying with like the children when they first arrived at the island and their auntie was busy.
mhm,
It was so ridiculous that they were acting like that was the gravest offense to them that they'd ever had. They
mhm.
wouldn't give a shit. Like if you went to visit your auntie at a theme park and she
And they
said,
gave
"Hey,
and
I'll see you tonight,"
and they gave you like an access all areas queue
you'd be
jumping
like,
pass. It'd be
"Okay,
like, see you later, yeah.
yeah, I'll
But
see you
no,
later,
because
aunt."
that's only done. That's only there just to portray her like her very shallow and offensive character development of being an uncaring, not an unfeminine woman, but a woman that hasn't realized her true purpose in life, which is to be a mother figure and to
Mm,
be a loving woman to children. And it just portrays her as that's her character arc, basically, is that she is married to her job and she doesn't care about children. She doesn't care about the animals. And through the film, she learns to. But we'll get to that later because the final scene of the film is probably the most offensive of all. But we'll get
No,
to
there's
that. So
also that weird bit where I don't know, they're getting ready to her and Owen are well, I don't even know her name. I think it's Sarah.
it could be, yeah, it could
Where they're
be.
getting ready to run through the jungle or whatever they're doing. Like it
Oh,
makes no sense, right? There are
yeah, yeah,
these
yeah. I
dinosaurs
know
that
what you're
can
gonna
run
say.
like 100 miles an hour, and they're going to run by foot and track them somehow. Like
No,
it's
you can't. Don't try and
right.
use logic. Don't try and apply common sense
But
or
like
intelligent thought.
the first movie, at least they were in jeeps and stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
These people were mostly all on foot
Hmm.
on this big island. Like they kept showing this map of like, oh, in the northern quadrant or here, there. You know the
Yeah, there's the whole. Oh, we have to get to that. We have to make sure we
and
allow
anyway,
time for
so
that.
that
But
bit,
yeah.
which is a throwback to Laura Dern, where
Hmm.
she's getting ready. So Bryce Dallas Howard, who is Ron Howard's daughter, by the way, nepo baby, um, she unbuttons her shirt, ties it around her waist, and winds up her sleeves, and said, "Okay, I'm ready." It's that's I think what Laura Dern does in the original one,
Hmm.
and so it's a throwback to that. And
Hmm.
it, I mean, that was 30 years ago or something, right? And even then, that sort of sexist romancing the stone bullshit was dated
Yeah.
and tired. To
But
see it in a movie in the 2000s and to
hmm.
be done unironic, like it was so nasty. All these little snide sexist tropes
Hmm.
were so depressing to see in a movie.
Yeah.
Also, as the movie goes on, this she's at first portrayed like this ice queen who, he alludes to maybe they once had a date or something and that she was too
Yeah.
frosty and
And she's very, she's such a control freak. She doesn't drink because of the calories, or she's like on a restricted diet or something. He
uh,
alludes to that.
the more it
Um,
goes on, like at the beginning her hair is like really straight, and
mhm.
then as it goes on, obviously there's humidity in the jungle or some bullshit, but
Stop trying to apply logic.
her you know, clothes become looser and less fitting or less of them, more skin is showing. Her hair becomes like damp and wavy and she looks softer. It's like the Ice
Hmm.
Queen is defrosting. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
this horrible, horrible
She's
messaging.
portrayed as this
Uh,
like uptight, unemotional, sort of cold ice queen, and the savage natural woman is brought out through this series of events and through her power of attraction for this masculine character of Owen. It's just disgusting. It's just so it's nauseating. It's truly obscene. But yeah,
and what about we talk about like the male gaze in movies,
mm,
how um women are often projected on screen and in art as if a man is looking at it and what would be pleasing to a heterosexual cisgender male.
mm,
I think they've applied the male gaze to Chris Pratt and they've thought, what would a man like to see portrayed? So there are all these weird shots of his ass
mm,
looking like all like stacked in these jeans in these cargo pants or his crotch. Like it'll
mm,
pan up on him, but like start at the crotch and like he's
yeah,
got like a big bulge in his pants. And
mm,
for the first half of the film, especially, there are lots of lingering shots on what his body, especially his torso, look like.
mm.
And I know that probably they think, oh, that'll appeal to like straight women. But I think a lot of it was done to appeal to the fantasy that men have of what they themselves would look like in that role.
Yeah, well, that's classic Marlboro Man, right? Marlboro Man wasn't designed by ad executives to appeal to women. Marlboro Man was developed to appeal to men and to be the what real men should aspire to.
Mm.
And Chris Pratt is the modern day Marlboro Man. I mean, it's just it's horrible. It's truly
It's
horrible.
it's
But
it's really hypersexualized.
mhm.
Like it's like showing that if you've got like muscly body and a big butt and like a big package in the front, that you're somehow more like
Yeah,
capable
I
or
mean, it's so
assertive.
basic. It's like I wrote in my notes. I think this film was written by troglodytes because it's so dumb and so basic that defies belief. Like it truly defies belief. I remember when we saw it in the cinema and just thinking, God, what a shit film. But
There's we will.
rewatching it last week, I could not believe how awful and offensive it was. But just on the sexism, I mean, there's we've talked about, the Sarah's character development, and from Ice Queen to mother figure. But there's this conversation she has with her sister in the film. That she's on the phone to her sister, and she says something like, the sister's back in the States crying outside a business meeting because her and what message does that send? It's like, wait a minute, aren't you, it's such mixed messaging for women. Oh, you've got to be an executive, but you can't let your emotions get in the way of your work. It's just playing into
It
so
wasn't
many
even clear why
sexist
the mother was
tropes.
crying. It
No,
wasn't clear.
but on the phone, the two sisters talking, and then Bryce's character says, "If I ever have kids," and the sister says, "It's not if, but when." Like
Mm.
as if women who don't have children
And
just
she
don't
says something like
exist.
it's all worth it, or
Childless cat women.
it's so
Yeah, it's all worth it.
distasteful.
Yeah, she says, and it's all worth it. It's all worth it. And I went to see a film a couple of months ago now, Night Bitch, and it's got that same sort of uh, what's the word? Not glorification, but that continuation of that sacredness of motherhood, which, I'm sure being a mother is a very powerful and amazing thing, but it's not the one thing that defines a woman. You know, we've developed so much as a society, as a global community, that being a mother is not what defines a woman in this day and age. It's disgusting to think that that is what defines a woman,
We
and
we
what
were
values
watching
her.
we were watching it. Hill watched it with me, and we were watching it with the subtitles on in English.
Oh yeah.
And there was this bit where I don't know, maybe when all havoc breaks loose in the park and the flying dinosaurs, are they
Oh, the
pterodactyls, or
pterodactyls.
they'll
Yeah.
come swooping down on people.
Yeah.
And because they sometimes put subtitles up for the sound that's happening if no one's talking.
Hmm.
And there was this subtitle on the screen that it was a perfect representation of how I felt about the movie. And it said, "Alarms wail / people scream." And I was like, that's how I feel on the inside. Alarms wail and people
People
scream.
scream. Yeah,
But
it's so true.
I mean, not to be, I suppose we could say something slightly interesting that isn't completely negative about it. And that there was an interesting, because it's Steven Spielberg related, right? It wasn't directed by him, but he
The
directed
original
the
was,
first
but
one
yeah,
and he was involved in this in somehow.
yeah.
Um, when they feed that dinosaur, what's it called? Is it a Mosasaurus? The one that's in the water?
Oh yeah, yeah.
When they feed it a great white shark hanging from
Hmm.
a, and I think that was like a nod to Steven Spielberg and Jaws
Yeah,
to
probably.
have
That was
that
the
in
most.
there.
That was the most intelligent thing in the
Yeah,
film.
and so I'm like, oh, that's a nice little nod to that filmmaker's history. I mean,
Hmm.
not interesting really. It was just like a little nod,
No,
like a
and it's
little
sad if
Easter
that's
egg.
if that's the best thing about the film that we can think
And
of.
talking
That's
about the lack of plausibility, why on an island that is like futuristic with fucking orbs that can like move around with Jimmy Fallon,
gyroscopes. Is that what they're called?
gyroscopic orbs with Jimmy Fallon doing a mad scientist routine in it, or
Hmm.
all this like you know really really intense technology. How do like phones suddenly not work, or walkie talkies can't get a good signal? And it annoys me so much when that happens in a movie, even a fantasy movie. Like if
Yeah.
you're going to have, you're in this hyper like super 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 futuristic situation,
Hmm.
people would have figured out how to make phones that don't cut out when you get in the jungle, you
Yeah, I
know.
know. I know. It's ridiculous. Um, okay, so there are two things. I'm just conscious of the time. There are two things that I also wanted to talk about in the film. One is the anti-fatness, and the other one is racism.
Well,
So
where's the
take your pick.
anti-fatness? Where's
Well,
the
the
anti?
anti-fatness is, and it's present in all of the Jurassic Park films, but in this one particularly, there are two fat people in the film. Well, actually, no, there are two fat people with lines in the film. Um, Both of them die, of course. Both of them are incompetent or
Evil.
bad. Yeah. One of them is a feckless worker who only has a couple of lines, is always eating, and gets killed by a dinosaur because of his own laziness, slovenliness, incompetence, etc. And the other one is the sort of the military guy who wants to use the
Yeah.
raptors as a war weapon.
Yeah,
And
Vince D'Onofrio.
and he's not particularly overweight, but it was so noticeable because of the thinness portrayed by everyone else, and no other character with dialogue had was overweight or fat apart from those two, and they both die, and they're both portrayed as bad characters, bad people, and I mean, obviously, in the first film, the most extreme example of anti-fatness is Nedry, the character in the original film who steals the embryos, and his greediness and slovenliness again are seen as negative portrayals. And I mean,
I don't know that character. Is that Wayne Newton from Seinfeld?
yeah, exactly. And we could talk about, I mean, the portrayal of fatness in mainstream cinema is so problematic. I don't think we even have time to get into it now. But
Yeah.
just in the Jurassic Park universe, fatness is never portrayed as anything good at all. And
Yep.
it's just vile. It's just all fat people die, and they probably deserve to die
There are
because of
so
their fatness. That's the
there are
message.
so many things wrong with the film
Yeah,
that it's actually exhausting to talk about it.
yeah.
And it almost becomes redundant. It's like, oh yeah, it's sexist. Yeah, there's toxic masculinity. Yeah, the kids are badly written. Yeah,
Mm.
it's like one dimensional. Yeah, it's racist. Yeah, it's fat phobic. Yeah, it's
Hmm.
it is just a steaming pile of shit.
It really is. It's horrible. It's horrible. Um, how are we doing for time? Because we definitely need to quickly talk about the most offensive part of it, and that's the racism. And I don't know where to even begin with this, but there's a dinosaur, um, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing the Latin correctly or not, but I believe it's a Pachylosaurus. Pachylosaurus, I think. And not just in this film, but I think in many of the other Jurassic Park films, I'm not going to say the word, but there's an offensive term, PAKI, which is used to describe people of South Asian origin, mostly from India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. And it's maybe not a term that's used in the US, but certainly in the UK, it's very prevalent and it's very offensive. It's a horrible racist term. But in this Jurassic World film, they shorten the name of the Pachylosaurus to this offensive name, and even extending my goodwill to the makers of this film to believe that they didn't do that intentionally. There is no fucking way that not one person of all the hundreds and thousands of people involved in the making of this film, there's no way at any point it wasn't brought to the attention of the studio or the producer or the director
Yeah.
that that is an offensive term. If it's not an offensive term in the US, it's an offensive term in the UK.
Like,
And
to give people like some context, this P word in the UK is as offensive as the N word
yeah,
in the rest of the world,
and that's what I
especially in the
wrote.
United States.
That's what I wrote. If there was an equivalent dinosaur which could be abbreviated to the N word, there is no chance in hell that it would have made it
Yeah.
into this film. There is
So
no fucking
so
way
there
that it
would
would make
not
it.
them could it's not even conceivable that there wasn't somebody who had some knowledge of
Yeah,
the offensive nature of this word
yeah.
in the
And
whole of the hundreds of people involved in the development of that
exactly.
script, that there
And
is
so
nobody that would have known.
and so the only conclusion I can come to is that it was deliberate and it was deliberately left in there as a racist baiting term. And it's if they needed to leave that plot line in, they could have changed it to a different dinosaur. They didn't have to abbreviate the name. And I actually think the film was made for to be offensive. I actually think they were trying to push the envelope here, and you could look at it in a much broader context in the sort of the de-intellectualizing of modern culture, modern societies, and you look at things like the rise of populism and populist leaders and president elects that we're not going to mention by name. But the film truly is sort of trying to push. It's an anti-woke film. It's deliberately made to be an anti-woke film, and I believe that inclusion of that racist term was a very, very deliberate part on a deliberate decision on the part of the filmmakers, and it's
I
just
find it
awful.
difficult to believe that, I don't know, if they would left it in deliberately to be provocative, or maybe somebody did say, "Hey, this means this," and they said, "Actually, it doesn't in the US. We don't care." Maybe it was like
No,
a non-caring kind of thing.
no, I don't think so. I think it was deliberate. I think it's so fucked up and it's so offensive, and I
I
think they
mean,
should be held to
you
account.
couldn't imagine, like, if you're not from the UK, and I think it's also maybe in Australia as well. But it's not as known as a word in Australia. But in
Mm,
the UK, if you ask someone to say a racial slur, it's probably the first one they would say.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I can't, above the N word. Like, I don't think that there is a racial slur that is more
no.
commonly understood to be an offensive word.
No, no, definitely not. I think it was deliberate on the part of the filmmakers. But anyway, that's obviously one of the most extreme forms of racism, but a much more subtle one, and it's a trope that is present in other. And talking about, it's interesting. You mentioned the Jaws film, but in one of the Jaws sequels, I think Jaws 3, perhaps, there's a theme park, an aquarium theme park, where they try and have a captive great white shark, and the owner of it is this rich black guy. And the sort of moral of the story is that he was a fool, and he dies, and he was a fool for ever thinking that he could control or take charge of an organization or an attraction like that. And so it's not overtly racist, but it's a very subtle form of racism. And they did the exact same thing in Jurassic World. They have a South Asian guy, well, an American guy of South Asian origin, who is a billionaire, and he is the owner of the park. And he is portrayed again as this sort of rich, bumbling fool who has only gotten as far in life as he has because of his wealth, and he dies because of his own stupidity, let's say.
Well,
Because,
there are two kind of Asian men who
well, yeah,
die, right?
there's Henry Wu as well. We haven't gotten to him yet, but yeah.
It's
I know it's just so awful. And yes, I mean, there's that Hollywood trope of uh, rich men of color who, and this is why I say it's a film that is made to counter wokeness, because I think the intended takeaway of this was that, oh well, yeah, see, people of color can't manage things in the way that a white man could. I
But
think
they
that's
in the movie they also have that black character that is like Chris Pratt's character's
his
friend.
sidekick. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like reducing him to like that, like a really old racist sort of Man Friday kind of vibe of like
Totally. And he was,
he's taking the lead from the strong alpha white male,
mhm,
and he
yeah.
doesn't really get his own story apart from being the sidekick.
Well, except if you notice, he's a black man, but he doesn't have an American accent, does he? He has an African accent. He speaks English with an African accent. And so, again, it's like, why do you have to rely on such racist tropes in a film? Like, why couldn't Chris Pratt have just had a black co-worker who didn't have to be of African descent? I just find it all
Well,
so
they use that.
casually, like,
Yeah, they
offensive.
use those racist tropes of like what do you call it? Like
Yeah, exotification. Yeah.
exotification of people. So they'll have the rich business owner be Asian. They'll have
Mm.
the sidekick who's good with animals be black with an African accent. Like
Hmm.
it's so shit. It's
It's
so racist. It's
horrible. It's
straight up
horrible,
racist.
horrible film, and it's the watching it the second time around. I because the first time around, I don't think I really thought that deeply about it. I just thought this is horrible. Watching it the second time around, I've come to the conclusion that it was deliberately meant to be offensive, and it's like the the sort of the clickbaiting thing of what Dump does, what President-elect Dump does when he says something which is offensive, but then sort of it's sort of backpedals a bit, So he'll say, and Nigel, I don't want to say his name, but the leader of UKIP in the UK, he does the same thing. Like it's such a well used device now by populist politicians to say really fucking horrible offensive things
Mm-hmm.
and then just say, oh well, that's not what I meant, to sort of backpedal and say, well, no, well, you don't have, if you've
Yeah.
misconstrued what I've said. And it's like, no, you had every intention of saying something horrible and offensive to appeal to the populace. And that is exactly what this film's doing on so many
I
levels.
yeah.
It's
Before I forget, I also wouldn't mind just touching on the fact that you've been using the term woke or anti woke.
hmm,
Um, I don't
I use
like.
it ironically, right?
And I think we could just explain that
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
I don't like the appropriation of the term woke that
No.
mainstream audiences or media have done to the word woke because it was a word that or a term or a concept that was popularized and used mostly by African American activists to describe staying vigilant against
Hmm.
oppression.
Yeah.
And like most things, white people have taken that and made their own context and construction around that
Hmm.
term. And so
Hmm.
I'm just mindful that we put that out there that
Mm,
I
yeah.
don't think we use the term woke here to say we know what it means. We're using it because it's been weaponized by racist people to mean
Yeah.
something completely different.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's, yeah, exactly. I mean, when I use it, I don't say that we're woke. I use it as like in an ironic sense and in the context of everything that this film is trying to combat.
I
The
remember years ago we were on one of those vegan cruises and we met that there was a couple from the US, they were a white couple, and we were talking about politics. And he goes, "Oh, well, I suppose I'd describe myself as woke." And I said, "Oh, well, I know what you mean, but you shouldn't use that term." And that was how long ago would that have been?
I don't
Like,
remember that conversation, but that would have been
and
at
I
least 10 years ago, I think.
yeah, maybe more. And I explained to him, I said, "Hey, this is the reason why you shouldn't use that as a white person.
Mm,
Why I think you shouldn't. You can do whatever you want." And
mm,
he was like, "Oh, thanks. I'd never had that explained to me." And that was
mm,
a long time ago. And now it shows you how long things take to, like, that was somebody who was in progressive circles and so had obviously heard the term. And it's
mm.
taken that long for it to filter through to mainstream discourse, where even
Yeah.
politicians and newspapers use it as an interchangeable term for when they mean something else, when they mean, like,
Mm, mm,
politically correct. It's
yeah.
taken the place of political correctness.
Yeah. And it's been used, it's been weaponized by the right. It's been weaponized by conservative politicians to mock it's yeah to basically mock or make poke fun of people who have progressive politics and progressive values
Or
and
people who
to
care about the safety and dignity of other humans.
well yeah and so yeah when Suella Braverman, who was I think she was the Home Secretary, well she was the Home Secretary, but I don't know if she was the Home Secretary when she said this in Parliament, but she talked about in the UK House of Commons, she spoke about Guardian reading, which is a UK newspaper news website, left-leaning news outlet. Guardian reading tofu eating wokerati, and it got so much, it's so many laughs from the right-wing conservative side of the house because it was, admittedly, I mean, it's horrible, but admittedly,
Hmm.
that was a brilliantly written joke. And I mean, I don't doubt for a second that she came up with it off the cuff. I think most of those speeches in
Oh
Parliament
yeah,
are written in advance. And it was
yeah.
actually brilliant because it was, it was like, when a comedian delivers a really good joke, even if you don't agree with the sentiment behind it, it's a well-crafted joke. And that's exactly it. Like this anti-woke brigade, as a lot of right-wing politicians are proudly calling themselves now. It just
Mm.
it. I find it so nauseating.
Yeah.
I can't even just get my head around it. But this film, back to Jurassic World. I do think that this film was, and I don't know where the blame lies exactly. I don't know if this was a studio executive decision, a director, a producer. I don't know how aware of this the actors were or
Mm.
other people that worked on the film. But
I think people like Chris Pratt or um, whoever else is in the movie. What's her name? Bryce
Bryce
Dallas
Dallas,
Howard. I think they're so far removed from reality anyway, and they sell their
yeah,
souls to the devil to be in these movies.
yeah.
That even if they were like, "Hey, I've got English friends who told me that that word means it's a racial slur against people from Pakistan," I don't think they have. I don't know. They'd have agents in their ears, managers in their ears, just saying, "Look, shut up and toe the line."
Well, going back to what you said at the beginning about the power of Hollywood, the power of studios to tell people what they can and can't do, what they can and can't like, what they can and can't decide for themselves. And yeah,
Hmm.
you're right. I don't. But interesting to me is that Bryce Dallas Howard is not in the new Jurassic World film. Well, I don't think she is anyway, but I know the lead is Scarlett Johansson,
Well,
and
this is another sexist thing. Often in these superhero or action star movies, the women are seen as interchangeable,
mhm,
and they bring in whoever they think is the most bankable, or sometimes the younger version.
mhm,
Granted, Scarlett Johansson isn't younger, but she's probably seen as more bankable.
yeah,
And the men, even if the men turn out not to be bankable, there's this toxic masculinity and sexism and misogyny that runs through the entertainment industry that see the men as more important. So,
yeah,
Indiana Jones, Superman, whatever. You'll have like women who are stars in movies alongside the men, getting paid less than the men that are in the same
yeah,
movie.
yeah, yeah.
That
Um,
movie pissed me off no end. I just never want to speak about it again. I
well,
don't want to watch it again. I don't.
just to sum up our ill feelings towards it, I just think that last scene is so, to me, it's such a good encapsulation of everything that's disgusting about the film, and that is at the end after the theme park is closed down, hundreds of people have died, whatever. They're airlifted out to, I assume it's in Costa Rica, and they're in this big aircraft hangar, and the leads, Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard are in the warehouse. The two teenagers are there. The teenagers' parents have flown in from America to look for their children. Anyway, Bryce Dallas Howard's character sort of scans the room. She sees the parents reunite with the children, and she just this sort of close up look on her face to portray this realization that she's having that, oh, I see the beauty in motherhood. I see the beauty in having children. And then her and Chris Pratt's character, um, you know, have a kiss. And it's kind of like, it's so basic and so stupid
Yeah, and that
and
the
so
final line
offensive.
is something like, "Well, what are we going to do now?" And it's like, "Stick together."
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
like we're a family now, kind of thing.
yeah, that's it. Like the woman,
I was not very well yesterday, and I actually vomited.
hmm,
And remembering that final scene makes me feel like I want to throw up again.
it's just disgusting, isn't it? It's so horrible. Um, yeah. So
Jura-
anyway, that's
Jurassic
Jurassic
World, more
World.
like Jurassic shit. Am I right, people?
Yeah. That one needs to go. That's too hip for the road. Um, so anyway, that's our review of Jurassic World, and suffice to say, we don't recommend it, and we actually think someone should be held to account for it. But anyway, that's our wrap on Jurassic World. What
Well,
else? Is there
I
anything?
didn't even get to talk about my internalized homophobia at the barber, or my UK citizenship ceremony because I'm now a British citizen.
Oh yeah, well, congratulations on
We'll
being
have to
part of
save that
another
for save
problematic
that.
enterprise. But yeah, we've talked about barbers in the on the pod before as well. But I'll have to hear about your internalized homophobia at the barber in the next
And I
week's
want to
episode.
tell you about the hilarious ceremony to become a British citizen. It was hilarious.
Oh yeah. I need actually speaking of barbers, I do need to go and get my beard sorted out. So we should wrap up. People can find you where, Sean?
You can find me as a British citizen on Instagram at FatGayVegan. How about you?
You can find me as a British and Australian citizen,
Oh,
actually
same.
like you
Yeah,
now, yeah.
nearly.
And I'm at joshandthejumpstarts.com or on social media and all streaming platforms as Josh and the Jumpstarts. And my EP is out now, so please listen to that.
And if you like the sound of the theme song of this, go and listen to the full version. Um, the link is in the description of this video, or if you just go on Spotify or Tidal or wherever you stream music and search for
Josh and the
MTC
Jumpstarts. Oh,
and the
okay,
song
you got
MTC.
MTC. I'll link to
Yeah,
it in the show notes as well.
yeah.
I thought you were going to say if you like the theme to Jurassic Park. That's the best thing about the film. Is the
I will
soundtrack.
say something very basic as we sign off, and that Chris Pratt is a very attractive man. I would like to say that as a very basic. That's the only good thing I can take out of it.
Well, so is Vince. What's his name? Vince D'Onofrio.
D'Onofrio.
Yeah,
Yeah,
despite being fat.
but the amount of makeup they had on Chris Pratt, he looked like a freaking drag queen.
I know. Well, maybe he's been watching our. We haven't mentioned Trixie in this week's episode, so maybe he's been watching some Trixie on YouTube, Trixie tutorials.
Uh,
Um, all right, folks, we will be back in your feeds this time next week. Until then, don't watch any Jurassic World films, but do look up Sean and my social media stuff if you want to know more. And we'll be back in your feeds this time next week.
okay.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.